Hey, and welcome everybody back for another week of Reconnected, celebrating our end of the year episode with Mr. Zachary K. Bryant from They Live by Film. Zach, welcome back. It's been, I was trying to think about this earlier. Was the last time really May when we did the Vinegar Syndrome thing?
I think so. I'm trying to think what was the last thing we did. I know we did women directors for horror, and then I can't think if we did one after that.
It's been a crazy time. Michael Smith is asking how you're not a country music star.
Too many letters in my last name.
So it's been a long time. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened in physical media with the podcast and everything. How's the year been for you?
It's been it's been busy. The podcast has been good. We're trying to make a slight change to those who listen, so we're figuring that out now. I think we do a format change. It seems like every year, so I guess it's just tradition at this point. But
right.
Beyond that, I got a vacation a month and a half ago, and that's pretty much all I worked for in 2023. And now I can just move on to the next year.
So why was it such a big vacation? Tell everybody where you went.
I went to Eastern Europe. So I started out in Poland. I went to Slovakia, and then I went to Austria, and then I went to the Czech Republic, and that was over 2 weeks. And
I am still jealous that you got to do that.
Well, I'll be jealous of myself for the next couple of years when I can't afford to do anything else. So it's fine.
Yeah, that's the hard part with travel, and that's for me. Like that's why I dread it, because doing it for a family of four, I mean, like traveling to Eastern Europe just for one person's expensive.
Yeah. That would have been Chris, but it is a great interview. I will definitely pass that along to him.
Zach is sometimes there for the interviews, mostly listening behind until he thinks of some amazing question, and then you realize 20 minutes into it, oh, Zach was there.
Yeah. I just try to hide in and see what happens.
So what you been watching? Has there anything been going on movie-wise that you've been paying attention to?
Well, I've been catching up on the 2023 list. I got to 105 movies from this year so far. I'm going to go see Ferrari tomorrow. And beyond that, I've been trying to actually watch more stuff I enjoy. So a lot of found footage here lately, because I have to get into that about once a year and go watch a bunch of useless stuff on TV and then try to get other people to watch it.
I just put out my episode on found footage probably a month ago, and I swear it's one of those topics that I am super passionate about, and I got like no engagement from it. I swear nobody likes found footage except for like me, you, and like 8 other people in the world.
It's like last night we were watching. Me and my girlfriend were watching Host, that one that Rob Savage did. I hadn't seen it. It'd been on my list since I watched Dashcam, and she's sitting over here in the corner with like a pillow over her face, and I'm just like, you don't see that. Like, I can't get her to get scared of anything else, but found footage will terrify her, and I think it's got that potential for it.
There's a lot in found footage that I love that it seems like hardly anybody has seen. That's the biggest thing, is I just trying to get people to hear about some of these, because they don't get enough of the I guess word of mouth going compared to some of these other films.
Or if they finally do, they end up like getting a lot of criticism. Like, I mean, I know the criticism against Blair Witch Project is it's boring, but I'm like, that's kind of what makes that movie work, because it's boring. Like, I adore that film to death. But the fact that nothing really happens is, what made people actually believe it happened, because it's like, well, we didn't see anything. So it could be real.
Well, tonight, after our announcements, which there's not that many, which I didn't really plan on there being too many tonight, so we're going to have kind of a big topic. Tonight, we're going to be discussing our top 10 favorite Stephen King adaptations, because I just wanted the world to fight tonight with us. I kind of figured this is going to be a contentious topic for many people. We'll talk about some other recent watches, because I think there's some on my list from this week that you've seen already, and then a couple pickups that I wanted to share from some patrons this week. But I feel like I did much better than normal watching some recent films this week. So The Holdovers. Did you guys see The Holdovers?
No, I missed that one, to be honest. There's a lot of movies in my area where it's like they would show up for a week and then they'd go. That was one of them. Dream Scenario was one of them, and there was another one I just mentioned today, and I was like, I didn't get to, American Fiction. I didn't get to see any of those because they ran for one weekend and left.
Yep, that's the worst part about some of these for sure. I got to say, The Holdovers, I am going to be surprised if they don't pick up kind of all of the nominations. It is that good of a movie.
Really?
The three leads that are in this, I would not be surprised to see any of the three of them win. Giamatti is deserving of the best actor, probably. The student, he's a new actor. I cannot remember his name at the moment. He's incredible throughout this film, but then Divine Joy Randolph is just remarkable in this movie. It is such a great performance from her. Really, really great combination of the three of them coming with very different personalities and just meshing in this very like brash feeling movie that turns into sort of a feel good movie by the end of it. So it's great. And we got multiple people saying Holdover starts streaming on Peacock tomorrow, just so you
may have to watch. I do have Peacock, so might have to give that one a watch if it's as good as you're saying it is.
Sibner saying Dominic Sena. I think it's Dominic Sessa now that you say that. I think I'm remembering that right. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Alexander Payne did great in it, but yeah, Giamatti just absolutely embraced his role, and it's easily the best thing he's ever done. But the other thing, the Iron Claw, did you get to see that one yet?
I did. I saw it on Christmas Eve. I went to see that and Aquaman double feature.
What a hell of a double feature. How'd you feel about Aquaman?
Aquaman is I actually feel in the minority that liked it. I like the first Aquaman. I like James Wan a lot, so there's my bias there. I don't know. It's a goofy little movie. It's really goofy. It's really dumb, and I kind of appreciate it for that. Like yeah. I don't know. I was also the type that liked Wonder Woman 84 for kind of the same reason. Like I don't know. I kind of like. I feel like there's a lot of superhero movies try to take themselves like a little too seriously. Even Marvel with all the jokes in it. I feel like it tries to like elevate itself above what it is sometimes, and I just kind of appreciate it saying that we're just going to be dumb and have fun, and you'll enjoy it if it's decently done.
Yeah. I saw the first Aquaman. I've not seen the second one. I didn't hate the first one, but it also didn't light the fire that I needed to see all of the other DC films. I think I've still only seen like 3 of the DC EU movies. Yeah. I saw that, the second Suicide Squad, and then the one I can't even remember what the third one was. So yeah, that's it. Just those 3. Weird 3 to pile into each other, but
yeah. And Aquaman 2 is kind of the end of this DCEU, which has been, I guess, if nothing else, interesting. It was a very interesting 10 years.
So Iron Claw, how'd you feel about this one?
I liked it. I think I had an expectation that it was really going to like get to me like more than it did, and I was a little bit. I guess I don't want to say I was disappointed because I really enjoyed it, and I have to give a movie credit that when it's so depressing, they just cut out an entire brother because they just don't want to hammer it home anymore. I kind of appreciate it for that, but yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. I think I went in thinking it would probably hit in my top 10, and when it didn't, I think I left a little disappointed because of my expectations. But what did you think?
This is weird. I walked away from it thinking it was about a 4.5-star film, like really felt high on it. But then thinking about it over the next couple of days, I think I've lowered that to about a 4. And I think the only reason I felt so hot on it in that moment, and this isn't really a spoiler. I kind of hate saying this because it takes the wind out of a slight part of the emotional parts. But Zac Efron has a line near the end of the film that says, "I used to be a brother." And that line gutted me in the moment, like immediate tears. That was the only thing that got to me. But thinking about it since then, like the script was a mess. The fact that you erased an entire brother is really weird. Like his reasoning for it is because he doesn't want to just do the same thing over and over again. But that's kind of the problem with the Von Erich curse, like that they're going through these things over and over again. Erasing it takes away some of the power of that. And I can't take anything away from any of the performances. Efron put in the best performance he ever has. Maura Tierney was like a revelation in this. I've never seen her act her ass off like that. Fritz, I never remember. I think his last name is McClannon. The gentleman that played Fritz, the father, the guy from Mindhunter, he was incredible in this, super compelling, probably
He's a
one of the
super
better.
underrated actor too. I hope
Yeah,
he gets some appreciation because he's. I've been a fan of his for a long time, and I'm glad to see him getting bigger roles.
yeah.
But yeah, really the part that kind of took it away from me. I hate, and I'm trying to do this without spoiling. There is, I guess I'll call it a fantasy sequence near the end. Like that's not from Efron's point of
Yep.
view near the end, and I'm like, this is kind of an unusual scene.
Felt a little weird to me too.
Yeah, I was like, because I feel like we got the point. Like I felt like, I don't know. It's one of those things where I think there's so much good in this movie, and I'd be really interested to see what else the director does because I think he has a lot of talent. He did a lot of. That's a tough story to adapt, and I think he did a solid job doing it.
And it looked beautiful. I got to admit, this is one of those things where you could have really phoned in a lot of the wrestling stuff and still told a really compelling, like dramatic endeavor type of story. He actually nailed a lot of the other wrestling stuff that could have just been bad. And it's really like Ric Flair is in this, and they gave the right attention to Ric Flair. They did him right. They covered everything appropriately. Loved that. Ronnie shouting out Maura Tierney and everything she's in. I will need to look that up to see if I've seen that. That title sounds very familiar. Let's see. We got a couple comments on this one. Without spoiling anything, I will say I took that scene as his interpretation or wish that he was making.
I thought about that, and I don't disagree with that. Is probably the intention. It just I think where the film had stayed so grounded, it kind of just took me out of it for a second.
Right.
Like I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong way that would have fixed that for me. But it just like I don't know. It was so weird to me because at first I was like, is this like some kind of weird flashback for a second? And then it was like, no, this is something else. So it was just one of those kind of moments for me.
Yeah. And then we got a couple people, one saying there's only so much to put in a 2-hour film, and then unless you add another 45 minutes to an hour footage, which I agree, but also it's a 2-hour 20-minute film. They put a lot into there. I also feel like this story is so complex. This probably should have been like a 6-hour HBO miniseries.
Which they cut out the fake brother, right? Like I know there was a guy, what was his name? Lance?
Yeah, I think they show him, but they don't mention him. They show him in like one quick scene.
A lot of his stuff got cut, if I remember correctly, because it's interesting, but it's not important to anything really going on.
Yeah. Thanks for the translation there, Erica. I was like, everything she's in sounds familiar, but no, you're saying literally everything that she's been in. I don't know. Cutting out the entire brother is weird, and the fact that he had the same fate as one of the other brothers shouldn't take away from the power of that. I don't know. It's still a great film, and I really hope everybody watches it.
Yeah, I think the only part makes it cut harder is because, I mean, I don't know if I can't remember if he had a note or not, but I mean, he was kind of, I know he felt ignored or he felt overshadowed. So to have him cut out of a film to be literally overshadowed is I don't think the director had any malintent at all. I think it's just like, how do I adapt the story? I mean, we're going to talk about adaptations plenty. It's a real life is even more complex than a book because you feel like you owe something because these are real people. So it's a tough thing to balance.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that parts of the family are still alive and they get to see this, like the fact that the family's getting attention is cool, but also leaving stuff out feels weird. I don't know. It's a weird line to walk. I get that.
Yeah, and I mean, people's lives aren't. And that's always the thing I try to go back to is like people's lives aren't cinematic. I mean,
yep.
It's an issue I had. I don't know if you've seen Napoleon this year. It's a movie I liked, but it's like it's an easy mistake to just feel like a Wikipedia article. Like they were born, some stuff happened, they died, the end, and it's just like, okay.
All right. It's probably time to talk about a couple pickups. Like I said, I got a couple stuff from some patrons to highlight. Is there anything that you've got recently you want to highlight, or are we passing since the vacation?
Well, I'm still waiting. I know me and you talked about this earlier, and I appreciate you letting me know. I'm still waiting on my Severance stuff. Like I spent about $200 on that sale, so I've been like waiting for the 4 to go in. the Paying 4 to finish up. And so a lot of stuff's just been little stuff. Mostly been getting into gaming. So just been picking up PS3 games because I have a problem that I just have to get back into a console that's probably barely running at this point.
Which one are you focusing on right now? What game is the big one this week?
Oh man, I got back into playing GTA 4. I guess the announcement made me nostalgic because I've never been a huge fan of 5.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to play my favorite one, and then I got through Far Cry 2, which is still awesome. That one's I know is divisive for a lot, but I love Far Cry 2.
If the moment I die, I get to see a list of stats about my life, I'm really curious to see how many hours I put onto GTA San Andreas because I lived in that game.
And and there's just that game is awesome. I just saw when I was at my parents' house for Christmas, and I got on my mom's Netflix because I don't have it, and I was like, whoa, you can play GTA San Andreas on Netflix.
What?
Yeah, it's on there. I'm like, what is this?
That's weird. Interesting. All right. So a handful of things. We did a Secret Santa on one of my Facebook groups I'm in. And one of them that got me is actually a patron of the channel. So I'll show Matt Shields sent me Silent Running, the Eureka release from the UK. And then I don't remember ever seeing this media book, but I got the Black Friday media book with Boris Karloff and Mr. Lugosi, of course. This looks pretty nice, and it's a Wicked Vision media book, and just straight up missed it. And then Flickering Waves, who's in the chat tonight, sent me a little package. And a cool thing, I've got the Wishmaster trailer on film.
Oh, that is
pretty
awesome.
Rad.
Those are 35 too, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Little promo card for the holdovers that we just talked about. Pretty nice. He sent a poster from the brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem with the April O'Neil character on it. Loved that. And then some local music from Tampa, Florida, Rec Center. And the other one is Die Alps, More Important Things. Eager to put those in this weekend. And then some old school Blockbuster promos of Planet Terror and Death Proof in immaculate shape. These are great. And then there's a little download code for another band in Florida on the back of one of those. And then Brian, who's in the chat as the Wonderment Project, just got these today, sent me some incredible laser discs. We've got Starman.
And you won't even have to buy the Columbia set now. Look at that.
Not at all.
You can
Escape
just watch
from LA. Who needs a 4K? Escape from New York. And then Assault on Precinct 13.
I feel like that Assault is hard to find just because I just feel like it gets overshadowed by the other ones. That's awesome.
I'm so stoked on those. And now I have more Carpenter to choose from for my eventual evolution to physical media thing that I'm going to work on, because I had body bags and I'm like, this is kind of a weird one to put on display for Carpenter.
Yeah, it's only like 2/3 Carpenter anyway, right?
Yeah. It is time, my friend, to have everybody start discussing the one, the only Stephen King. And so this one is so interesting because no matter if you love Stephen King's writing or not, if you are a horror fan, you have no choice really but to see many Stephen King adaptations. It's so odd that you could not even know that you were, hooked on Stephen King and yet love the source material and you've never read a book of his in your life. I gotta be honest, I've only read a handful, and it's been a very long time since I read them. So tonight, while we are discussing these are going to be favorite of the adaptions. These are not the best adaptions for what the story said and what they put on screen, and it's the best way to adapt that specific story. These are our favorites. And now, why Stephen King? Why is Stephen King a big deal for you, Zach?
It's because I'm a stereotype when it comes to being a horror fan. I started with reading Stephen King. That's really how I got into reading. I've read probably up to, I'm trying to think what book it would have been. Probably Doohickey. I had read probably 95% of what he has written.
Wow.
Since then, it's closer to probably 50. I'm very behind. I think Stephen King gets a hard time in his modern writing, but I do think he still comes up with a lot of great stuff. I still think he's a very influential writer. And I mean, it's just, hard to avoid them. I mean, we'll get into this list, and I mean, the amount of major genre directors that have decided to adapt one of his works is honestly impressive. There were some where I'm like, oh, they did two of them, or I didn't realize that this person did this. And I mean, you start looking at it, you're like, it has been such an influence since the 70s, and still is. I mean, I don't think we go a year without some type of Stephen King adaptation anymore.
Oh, that would be really interesting to look at. Like, what is I'm sure there's been a handful of years where we didn't get anything, because we only have, I think if you count all of the TV stuff as well, there's like 60 total, and a few of those all came out in the same year. So I'm sure there's like 4 or 5 years that nothing came out. But man, that would be really fun to look at. Like, what's the longest chain in a row that we got something every year?
Yeah, because I mean, they're just taking these random stories now. Like this year it was the Boogeyman, and then last year was Mr. Harrington's phone. Yeah, and it's like now we're just like scraping what's left.
Yeah, and I mean, even just a few years ago, the story that everybody had been told for years, like, you can't possibly adapt this one film that we're going to talk about, at least on my side tonight. And now we got that, because somebody that has found himself adapting multiple King stories has take it and ran with it, and it's pretty damn good. So I would see what everybody has. I will try to highlight as many comments as I have, but we're going to go through a full top 10. I actually have 4 that are pretty close to my top 10. So after we get done, I'll name a few that are close. So why don't you go ahead, start us off? What is number 10?
We'll get to. I'll wait till we're at your point to get to the honorable mentions. So I will just start us off real easy. I would actually have liked this one to be higher up just because of John Carpenter directing it, but it's got to be Christine.
We had the same 10.
Oh, did we? So we could just talk about this one right now. Great.
Yeah.
Have you read Christine, by the way?
I have not. I've never read Christine.
It's nothing like it. Like, if you go in expecting it to be like, it is nothing like it is. When you talk about bad adaptations, in that sense, it's not good. But as a movie, it's awesome. Like, I don't know. It's just, there's something really cool. Because in the book, it's much more of the ghost of the dude who they bought it from, whose name is escaping me now, sits in the passenger seat and is controlling everything. Where this one, I actually like that it's just, is it the car or is it Arnie doing all these horrible things? And I think that's just like a really cool way to go about it. It's much more simple, because I think that's more of Carpenter's thing. How simple can we make this story?
Right.
We don't need ghosts.
This one is great, and the real big thing I want to say about this is this one might even be tainted and biased a little bit why I love this so much, just because the damn practical effects in this are so impressive with the car. I mean, the fact that we have Carpenter undenting this mangled ass car and making it look pristine. It is such a, there's 2 or 3 scenes where it happens, and it's like, no one even tries to do that in 2023, and it just shows how much better this is. Like, the texture of those scenes, it makes me want to just run my fingers over the car and go, how the hell did you just do this? Because this was immaculate.
And it comes from a Carpenter who's been very open that he made that movie because he needed money after the thing failed and he got fired from Firestarter. And it's like, he can do that and not care. You have no excuse.
Exactly. Yeah, he basically like didn't even have that much invested in it and just shit it out. And we're like, yeah, this is really great. I love that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's I always think it's funny. The movie, they were so. This is another thing you don't really see as much today. They were so scared of that movie being PG that they said, let's just add as much cursing in it as we can, so we don't get a PG rating.
Yeah. Oh, good times with Carpenter. All right, number 9. Let's jump to yours. Since we have the same 10.
All right, number 9. I have. Let's hope it's different. I have Silver Bullet.
It is different. I still have yet to ever see Silver Bullet.
Silver Bullet, I wanted to rewatch it before we did this list, but I didn't quite get to it because honestly, I was going through. I kind of get a little off tangent here. I was going through some ones I hadn't seen in a while, and I was like, I'm going to rewatch Cujo. I have good memories of Cujo. Cujo was. I hope it's not one of yours, but Cujo was not good.
It's not.
No, it's not a good movie. It's really boring. I don't need to hear about it. Like, I was like, when do we get, like, I know this is like a King person, like this is in the book, and I remember it being in the book, But for some reason, I was like, that's what they cut out of the movie, right? Because this is 90 minutes. I don't want to spend 45 minutes talking about infidelity. I'd like to see the dog do something. It was that one, and I watched It Chapter 1, which I'll be interested to see if that's on there. I was actually pretty disappointed by that one. So it was one I really wanted to get to because I have such good nostalgia for it. And I think it holds up because even like it's probably been 15 years since I've seen it, and I still remember like the transformation in the church. I remember them treating like there's a scene where they treat like the making of the bullets like they're building Excalibur. Like it's almost like this fantasy element to it that's just really cool. It's a very tropey but unique werewolf story. So if you haven't seen it and you like werewolf stuff, definitely check it out.
Yeah, I definitely need to check it out. I've heard a lot of good things. I feel like I need to go on like a month-long werewolf kick. It's been years since I've properly watched American Werewolf in London. Show my wife has still never seen Dog Soldiers.
Have you ever seen Late Phases?
I don't even recognize that title, I don't think.
Late Phases is really good. So it's about a blind veteran who's sent into a home, and he realizes that these elderly people who are getting killed in his community, he starts to figure out himself that it's a werewolf, and he like preps for like the whole month to fight up against it. It's really good. The guy, did you ever see Stakeland?
Yes, I love Stakeland.
The main guy who played in Stakeland, he plays the veteran. I wish I could think of his name right off. Yeah. But he's in Late Phases, and it's really good.
I also still need to see that Jim Cummings one that just came out a few years ago.
The Wolf of Snow Hollow is excellent.
That's the one. Yeah.
It is excellent.
Yeah, so it would be very fun to have like a month-long werewolf deep dive, maybe soon for me. Dustin is saying, this is the first time I've heard negative things said about Cujo. It's incredible. The domestic drama of the first half makes the horror of the second half hit all the harder. While I agree with that, it does make it hit harder. I kind of prefer The Pack. Came out a handful of years before Cujo, and it hit a lot of the same things, even with like the dog attacking the car. And I think The Pack crossed the line a few places that Cujo was unwilling to. I don't know. Cujo it meanders a lot, I think.
And I just don't. It's hard to find anyone likable. Like I think Dee Wallace, she does such a fantastic job in that movie. Like no hate to her, she's awesome in it. But like I just keep watching these scenes, and I get it's the point. It's like this in the book. I'm not the biggest fan of the book anyway, but it's like all these people are like, yeah, I'm sure the dog's fine, and they just ignore it. And I'm like, these people are awful. Like take the dog to the vet, Jesus. Like he's just so like it's just like I don't know who to root for in this movie besides the kid. Probably shouldn't die. He didn't do anything.
Right. Well, this is going to be funny timing for my number 9 because you just said I'll be interested to see if it's on the list, and a lot of people are going to be upset probably with what I'm going to say about all this. But It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 combined are my number 9 spot, and I got to say I've never read the full book. I have started it and never got through it. I understand that it's very different than the movies. But for me, this one especially, and I obviously love the miniseries, It from the late 80s as well. I truly love the cast in It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. I think that they cast it basically perfectly. All of the kids are great. The adults are great. I understand that part 2 for a lot of people is rather off-putting, but I really like it. I really like the restaurant scene at the beginning. I like the way that they sorry, I've never sneezed on live before.
Bless you.
Thank you. I really like the way that they attacked a lot of the actual mythology that I feel like the miniseries was sort of lacking a little bit when it got to the adult side. Yes, and that's what Sivner just said is what I hear a lot. Without splicing them together, 2 loses all of the nostalgia of the first half. I get that, but I didn't want nostalgia in that second half. I wanted it to feel like a modern take. I really like the miniseries and both of them together. I just think it's a really fun story. I think they did a pretty damn good job of it. I won't say it's my favorite, but when it comes to all of the adaptions that we've got, it's number 9 for me. I'm into it.
I was there. I remember going to see it in theaters. It was hyped. I mean, I'm sure you remember how hyped
very
one was. It made an ungodly amount of money for what it was. Like
Yep.
it's honestly impressive to go back and look at it making like $700 million on an R-rated movie about, that didn't get that much of a budget, honestly, and it was made by a director. It only made a couple things. I think going back to it years later, the only issue, the biggest issue I really had with it, and I think this was probably brought up even when it came out, is the movie is really, really good at this background horror stuff. Like, the librarian staring at Ben as like he's reading the pages, and if you don't notice it, you don't notice it, but it's there and it's really cool. But then it's kind of underdone to me when it's just like shaking, running towards the camera. Like it's like it's that it's just one of those things where it just kind of doesn't take me out of it. It gets the scare it needs to, but then I just feel like it's gone.
Yeah.
Like all that build up is just gone for me a little bit. I am interested in going back to chapter 2 because I've read so many people who have this interesting thing where they actually like chapter 2 a lot better and they didn't like chapter 1. So I'm kind of interested in going back because even in the book, it's the issue of I'm really interested to see what's going on with the kids because it's just more tense. Like when you're reading what's going on with the kids and stuff. But yeah, you should read the book if you ever get a chance. Like listen on there's a couple good audiobooks of that one. I'd really recommend it if you're an audiobook person.
I need to. I really do. I won't say that I will, but I need to. I know that. Go ahead.
I was going to say the only thing I would say is if you don't read anything else by King, and this movie definitely won't be on either of our lists, I'd be completely shocked. Definitely go through the Dark Tower series. I still think it's the greatest thing he's ever done. I think it's some of the greatest fantasy novels ever written. They're so good. They're excellent.
Yeah, lots of people giving comments on it chapter 2 specifically. A couple defenders, not many, but a couple. Celeste repping the Misery audiobook. Nice. All right. So that is my number 9. Man, I'm very curious to see the rest of your list now. Let's go to number 8. What do you got?
I have one that is probably, I'm guessing it's a hot take. I've never heard anybody talk about it except for negative things, but I have Toby Hooper's The Mangler. We have Haunted Laundromat. That's really all I'd say. It's completely Coke filled, which is pretty much how the story was written. And then you have Toby Hooper taking that Coke filled idea and just going wild with it. Like Hooper's one of those guys that to me is just strangely underrated, even though he came out with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But it seems like everything after that was just divisive, or he didn't get to do what he wanted to. The Mangler just feels so unique, and there's nothing else like it. I understand why people hate it. I could see it's kind of like, I think the way some people feel about Maximum Overdrive, like it feels too Coke fueled, but I'm really into it because of that.
Yeah, Maximum Overdrive feels Coke filled through the whole thing. The Mangler feels Coke filled primarily like through the writing.
Yeah, it does.
The Mangler is not on my actual list tonight. I will say, slight spoilers, it's on my honorable mentions because it's pretty damn unique, and based on that alone, I kind of had to bring it up because it's such a fun, like, I'm gonna throw this on and go, what am I watching? Because this is so weird type of movie. I love it. The Mangler is great.
And I feel like that's Hooper's career, like, right? I mean, you look at like Life Force and you watch Eaten Alive and you're like, these are just wild movies. Like, what are we watching?
Yeah, I need to rewatch Eaten Alive. For some reason, I've only seen it once, and that one time I watched it, I think I was put off by the hotel set or something about it, and it just rubbed me the wrong way the entire film because of that. And now that I know what it is, I really just need to give it a watch again.
You're talking about Eaten Alive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the set is it's very dreamlike when you go back to it now. It's a very fascinating like movie. I love Eaten Alive. I wish it could get a better release.
All right. My number 8 is probably higher on many people's lists, but I'm going to go with Stand By Me. This is probably a damn near perfect script, and obviously has some of the best like tension-filled shots in some of the King adaptations, and it's just a good story. That's through and through. Like, obviously, we're talking about a writer who writes very well, who's one of the best. Who's literally one of the most famous authors of all time. And Stand By Me is one that when I put it on, I can look away and look back 20 minutes later and know exactly what's happening because I've seen it so many times. But even if I hadn't, it is one that I could do that because you can kind of fill the blanks in the story because it sort of tells itself. It is such a like true to life coming of age type story for this group of kids that you can just tell what is going to happen. And that's not a knock on it in any way. It's more of just, yeah, this is why we make movies. This is why we tell stories because they're relatable. And this one, especially for people that grew up, sort of in the middle of nowhere in a very specific time, you could see yourself living in many different roles in this movie, and it's just fantastic.
And what a cast! Like the cast of the movie, it's another one of those like when you watch the Goonies and you're like, they really did have like a super solid casting director do this well.
Yeah, that's a couple of these that they're kind of like It Chapter 1, actually. They're cast so perfectly, it would be kind of hard to fail.
And I will keep that in mind. I did not know that, so I will definitely look up that release.
All right. Your number, what are we on, 7?
So I have another controversial one, but not because of its inclusion, but where I included it. So my number 7 is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which I'm sure will be much higher on yours.
I kind of figured yours would be around the middle, yeah.
Yeah, The Shining is awesome. I've rewatched it plenty of times. I've probably seen it more than I've ever needed to. It's one of those where I don't know if it's where I've just watched more Kubrick films and it's kind of like slid for me because I've seen his other stuff, or it's just I've seen it way too many times. But it's kind of dropped a little bit for me. While I do like Nicholson's performance on its own, I do understand like King has been very adamant that Nicholson was a bad casting, and I get that. Like I really get that it was not the best. It works for the film, and it's hard to separate that sometimes because I've read The Stand not Stand, but the Shining so many times in book form as well, which I highly recommend. Even if they're very different, go read The Shining. The Shining is great. It's just a very different type of horror. But it's hard to really. It's The Shining's one that's hard to talk about. Everything has been said about it.
Yep. I get it. Sibner says, once you've read the book, you realize where Kubrick's version really loses the heart of the story. That being said, it's still a very well made film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that's supposed to be about being an alcoholic and overcoming that. And Kubrick's version does not have that at all. It basically makes King stand in the villain. So I can understand why King was not crazy about it.
Yeah, obviously this is notorious for King hating this one.
Especially when he's given so much praise to some really fucking terrible movies.
Yep. My number 7 is one that I have a feeling is going to be higher on yours. My number 7 looms large over my shoulder tonight, and that is Carrie. This is the one that started it all for King. This is a great story. This is the one that he could spend a little bit of time perfecting. He got turned down by quite a few, and his wife sort of pushed him to get the story out there. Obviously, that's this long legend at this point, but it's an incredible story. But more importantly, Sissy Spacek is legendary in this film, and Piper Laurie is amazing in this, and the whole story is just for outcasts, for people that are cast aside, for people that are pushed down, for people that are just plain bullied. This is an incredible piece of dark humanity. And in many of King's things, when there's such a supernatural take, and obviously this has supernatural stuff in it as well, the dark aspect of humanity in this rings true across so many different stages of life, across different classes, which is very rare in the King stuff, across different societies and figures across the entire world. Love this movie. It is damn near incredible. Yeah, not much else I can say about it. It's just not high up on my list because others are the favorite. Like, this is almost a perfect movie for me.
Yeah, I want to. I'll be talking a little bit more about Carrie here soon. But I think what makes this like so important to King is I think it's the movie that's you can look back on and kind of be happy that someone like that got the success he did because of something like this. Like I think it's kept him feeling very down to earth. Like when you listen to him in interviews and things like that, he just seems like kind of a nice guy. And it's because that's like he earned his success in a lot of ways and he deserved it. And he just seemed like a nice guy. So having something like Carrie, and I don't know if a lot of authors would do that. You know, they're saying, well, I'm going to write from the perspective of a 17-year-old girl and basically the horror of her getting her first period.
Yeah.
Like that is a wild direction to go for your first novel.
Absolutely. Dell on Movie says, I always view Carrie more as religious satire than horror. Any thoughts on that?
I think it could be both. I mean, this is one of these things where I try my hardest to separate like King from his work, because I mean, this is De Palma. This is. I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to think about it when you think about like De Palma. I could see him really discussing that more. Now, if we're talking about the novel, I think King has struggled a lot with talking about religion. Like that's such a main theme in his books is higher power and things like that. So it definitely can be, especially when he talks about like maybe organized religion.
Yeah, I could see that. The big thing for me is, it is a religious satire, but it's also terrifying. It's a terrifying satire, and that's with true satire. Satire doesn't necessarily mean comedy. So with that, it's a send up of how fundamental religion can fuck with somebody, and fuck with this family does it entirely.
Yeah, and I mean how, especially when you go to school and you think back to the people, I'm not going to say ignored, but you know, the weird kids you didn't really pay attention to because they were so isolated from everyone else. And you're like, I think that was what made King so interesting, is he kind of put you in that driver's seat of, were you ever this person? Were you a little cruel as a kid?
Yep.
And, you know, I think that's what makes it like, he'll get made fun of for his bullies because he makes some psychopathic bullies.
Oh yeah.
But these feel so much more true to life. Like these are just mean kids. Mean for the sake of being mean.
Yeah, throwing shit at somebody in the shower, and yeah,
and I mean, and that was probably the biggest mistake they made in the remake with what's her name, Chloe
Grace Moretz.
That's it. Is I feel like they went too hard on the bullying, which is not a usual thing for King, because like you look at like Henry Bowers and that kid's just a psychopath. Like a complete, like, I know you haven't read the book yet. If you really want to see some psychopathic behavior, the book's even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his friends too are just as bad. So it's like Henry gets a lot of the thing than it, but yeah. I'm guessing you don't have the remake on your list.
I do not. No, I was going to keep to one, but even then it's not, it doesn't stand up to the level of everything we've talked about tonight. Like even if you bring up something silly like The Mangler, which is my like 14, I'd still rather watch that than the Carrie remake, I think.
Yeah, and it's Julianne Moore, I think, is the standout in the remake. Like I think she's really good at it.
Yeah, I would agree there. There's a couple pretty interesting scenes, and this is a weird thing to compliment in this day and age, but the marketing on the Carrie remake was pretty damn great. They did a lot of really cool things for that, but I don't know. I feel like that movie could have been better.
Yeah, and I think they marketed it. There's some things they did bad with the marketing. Like they made a point that it's going to be closer to the novel, and then it was just a remake of De Palma's film. And it's like, which I'm fine with. Just market it that it's a remake of De Palma's film and not a readaptation.
Exactly. Dell says the remake wasn't terrible, but suffered from making Julianne Moore's version of the mom pretty weak and trying to fit everything into PG-13.
The PG-13 was a huge problem.
Yeah, definitely was. Yeah, it had to be right behind my head. This is the perfect night for it. And I think it's probably about time to switch that out, maybe after this show. All right, sir. We are all the way down to, that was my 7, so you're 6.
So I guess I'm going to just go ahead and hit Tobe Hooper again. We're going to talk about Salem's Lot. It's another one where it's just, you know, you think about like what Anne Rice did for vampires. Salem's Lot kind of changed a lot about how we view vampires today. Like we think of them a lot in a modern sense now, but that was a lot more rare. Even when Salem's Lot book came out, when the miniseries came out, I think it was considered a miniseries. It was like 3 hours.
Yeah.
When that came out, and its influence is just so cool. especially when we're talking a little bit more about something a bit more feral. It's not a very attractive vampire. It's not the Dracula we think of. So Salem's Lot's just cool. Like, especially for a TV movie. I'm going to have one more TV movie on here, but this one could easily be the exception for how great it is.
I have one left as well. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, this is great, but I'm gonna keep some thoughts to myself.
Okay.
Number 6 for me is one that's gotten quite a few mentions in the chat tonight, and that is Misery. I think this is maybe I'd have to really look at the list if I was going to make this argument. I probably should have paid attention earlier, but I think Annie Wilkes might be the best villain that Stephen King adaptations have. I'm really happy with the way that this was made. I think the acting in this is legendary from both of our individuals, which obviously with Kathy Bates and somebody as legendary as Khan, like, you expect it to be that perfect. And it's so, I don't know, it's like heartbreaking to see both sides of the story, because you get sort of some of these scenes from both of their POVs, and the one scene that everybody remembers from this is super painful because of your empathy as you're watching it, of course, but the countless scenes of him trying to escape that room and just being in so much pain. Not to make this extra personal for me, but I have been somebody that's had 2 foot surgeries. I've been somebody that's had gout many, many times in my life. And because of my upbringing, it was misdiagnosed for a decade. So it tore up the joints of my foot. And I had constant gout flare-ups for years. And now that I'm away from that family, I've been good for 6 years, haven't had a single flare-up, thank goodness. And because of all that, like, watching Misery nowadays is just this painful experience of, oh my God, like I have been in the middle of the night crawling across the floor the way he is, in massive amounts of pain. And I know exactly what he's going through. And because of that, it just sits in this deep pit of my stomach. And I adore this film. It's incredibly well made, but good God, does it hurt to watch.
And that's one of those ones they changed from the novel that I think was a good change, because I think it makes me cringe so much harder, because he has this, I don't know if it's one or both of them. I think it's just one cut off with an axe. And I don't know, there's something about watching that. It's rough. It's rough to watch the mallet scene.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. All right, moving on to your number 5.
For number 5, we've already talked about it, but it's De Palma's Carrie. I've said a lot about that one, so I'll keep it short. It's just, I think somebody mentioned in the comments, I wish I knew who it was, but they mentioned that it was also an important movie for De Palma, and they're very much right. I mean, it's kind of hard to remember that this was still fairly early in his career, and how different some of his stuff would be around this era too. So really cool one for him. I think it would have been interesting to ever see De Palma like tackle King again, especially just, he did Hitchcock enough. You can do a little King too, but that would be my number 5.
It's a solid pick, and mine probably could have been higher. No, not going to argue with that, of course. Video stores pointing out, gotta love the Misery production design, some of the best. Fully agreed. Let's see. Misery is flat out brilliant. Phone's about to die from Brendan, but Happy New Year, guys. Same to you, Brendan. It's a miracle Kathy Bates wasn't typecast as a villain after Misery, and in fact, like, she got all kinds of weird roles after Misery, and I'm here for it. She's always like this fun, outlandish hippie or something like that, and she's great.
And not the only King movie she's played in.
No, and she's pretty fantastic in what she's done. My number 5 is one that we just talked about, and I'm going to go through Salem's Lot now, because I have so much I could say on Tobe Hooper. He is by far the most underrated of the main masters of horror, which obviously silly title to use, but when you have these main franchises that have been built up for so many years, and you have somebody that's helmed them for multiple instances, and they get built up into whatever position that they're in, they're given some point of respect. But with Tobe, it seems like it's still fought for way more than it needs to be. the dude was brilliant. He took risks. He tried things that most people never would attempt to try. And with Salem's Lot specifically, like there are things that were shown on regular TV that are still competitive with being as terrifying as some of the images that we get every year now. And Salem's Lot is such a great rewatch. This is one that you can go back to multiple times, catch different things the next watch through. It's just easily one of the best Stephen King adaptations. And without Hooper, we wouldn't have got anything like this. I think that any other filmmaker of that time at that specifically at that year making it for TV, I really think it would have been quite a mess if it was by somebody else.
And when people criticize jump scares, Salem's Lot is the example I've used of how to do it correctly. Yep. That is still one of the best jump scares. It still gets me when I watch it sometimes. It's so Absolutely. Well done.
It's pretty damn great. All right, sir. Moving on to your number 4.
All right. Well, I wasn't going to be able to avoid this list without talking about a Frank Darabont drama about a prison that came out in the 90s. So we're going to talk about The Green Mile because it's way better than Shawshank Redemption.
Oh.
Yeah. Shawshank is fine, but Green Mile is a movie I'm going to go ahead and embarrass myself on live. That is the movie that made me bawl my eyes out because I saw this movie when I was like 6 years old. Wow. Like I still distinctly remember how bad I cried during this movie. And it's like, you think about King and you think about, how much he scared people. He could hit the drama well. Like when he needed to, and especially because Green Mile doesn't really have horror, it has supernatural elements to it. But I mean, it's almost to the point of being emotionally manipulative, but I don't think he ever crosses that line.
Yeah. Green Mile is great. I'm not going to take that away, of course. I do think nowadays that I've gone back to rewatch this, especially when it came out in 4K. God, probably 2 years ago now, something like that. Something about it just felt like a little bit more of a slog than I remembered it being, and I remembered loving this movie. I felt like they probably could have taken 35 minutes out of this movie.
I think that's a problem with Darabont in general. Like, I think he's a very bloated storyteller. Because I think I had the same problem with Shawshank, funny enough, and The Mist.
Shawshank has quite a bit that probably could have been removed and not changed the story, especially when you're adapting such a short story. Like, there was nothing to Shawshank. It's so odd. But I will say, The Green Mile, the cast is incredible. Obviously, you get a legendary performance out of Tom Hanks. Obviously, you got a legendary performance from the big man. And I'm sad that he passed so young. But The Green Mile, better than Shawshank. I don't know about that.
You can't tell me that every time you see the actor who plays Percy, you don't get like a little enraged. Just doesn't matter what part he plays, you're just a little mad.
Yeah. All right. Let me see what else I can do at number 4 to piss some people off. For many people, I don't think this would probably be about this high. I think most people are going to argue with that, but I love anthology horror, so I get to talk about Creepshow. I love this. Literally, probably one of the top 3 anthologies always. I think that this has some of the best segments that we've got out of any anthology out there. It's got obviously an incredible cast for what they put together. The people working on it together, you can't really argue with a Romero and a King making something like this. And then the style being taken from EC Comics and coming up with these stories that are silly yet also super sadistic in some parts and genuinely scary. And then Stephen King turning into this crazy moss-covered monster. It's a wild movie. It's got some fun parts, and it's just really, really fun in all of his adaptions. This is one that is actually like, I'm having a really fun time watching this.
And it's one that I was very happy when it got a 4K, because if I had to pick one, that movie looks so good. Like it was perfect for 4K when it finally got a release.
Yeah, I agree. And it looks really good on 4K. That's the important part. Man, there's a lot of people arguing with my take on Shawshank could have some of that fat trimmed. The hard thing with Shawshank, when we're talking about that for a second, when you're taking it from the story, there's nothing to the story. So all of what is in the book is extra comparatively, and really, like, that second act is just a little slow. I mean, it's not like I need it all to be, fast moving to be interesting. I love a lot of slow cinema, but Shawshank is great. I love Shawshank. It does feel a little overly long.
I feel like we retread a lot of the same water towards the middle. Like we've talked about this, and we're
Yeah.
just getting kind of a different example of it. And that's not to say I hate Shawshank. I really like Green Mile. Shawshank is one where I think I grew up at the time where, what was it? Was it because of The Dark Knight that everyone hated that The Godfather was ahead of it on the top 250, so they made Shawshank the number one movie on IMDb or something insane. So that was during the time where you had when I watched it was the expectations of this is supposedly one of the best movies ever made, and I'm like, it's pretty good. I liked it. That was kind of where I ended on that one.
Yeah. All right. Now's where I'm really going to piss some people off. Top 3 time. What do you got at number 3?
For number 3, I have a movie I think is way underrated. So I've already done one of his vampire films, so I'm going to do the other one. The Night Flyer, which was a very confusing, not quite a TV movie. It technically got a theatrical release, but it was made by HBO. So that one isn't the one I was talking about, but have you ever seen it?
I saw it years ago, and I say just, but it's been about a year now. I just brought in I think it's a UK DVD set.
So. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because I don't think the US has any good release of The Night Flyer.
I don't think so.
No, but it's probably, to me, like, King is usually is so good at, like, a lot of his characters at least being likable. They're flawed, but they're likable. The main guy, played brilliantly by Ferrier, is such a dirtbag. Like, this dude is just flying wherever this guy shows up so he can get, like, it's Nightcrawler 20 years before Nightcrawler came out. He's just an awful person. The vampire design is awesome. I hate that they kind of spoil that through every bit of marketing for Night Flyer, because I think that shock is just there for the first time you see him. Right. I think King always had, like, a very interesting, I think he really has 3 vampire stories, and I think they're all very unique and interesting.
Yeah, he's got a few. I would almost love to see him do another take on that nowadays. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that he's been doing recently is very different from his super popular stuff, but I would like to see, like, a grizzled old man Stephen King take on a vampire story.
I'll talk about one in a little bit, but I do think he has done a modern vampire take, just far from traditional.
Yeah. Man, still all kinds of stuff for Shawshank going on in the comments. So my number 3 is one that you mentioned already, and I don't think it's going to be on your list. The Mist. I'm a big, not really. I was going to say the word auteur here, but it would have been weird to apply to the 2 men I'm going to bring up here. But I'm a big fan of Frank Darabont for a lot of the stuff he's done. I think that he is really great at putting a compelling magnifying glass on certain things that need to be magnified. With The Mist, we get obviously one of the craziest endings of all time, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that. What I really want to talk about is Marcia Gay Harden. Her character in this film is probably the best villain in any of these adaptations, and it is so hard to overstate how evil, how just brash and, like, compellingly fundamental she comes across with just a few lines of dialogue here and there as this awful person. And she is doing things with her body movements, with the way that she there's a scene where she moves, I think it's a can, that long before she gets a can thrown at her, she moves a can or something, and it's just, you look like you're like, if I was writing the story, you'd be like slinking as you put this up there. And she's got this just taut, like, awkward condescension about her, that the way that she embraced this character, she deserves to be ran through the mangler. I mean, she is an awful person, and it ruins so much about this and shows the darkness of humanity, and really highlights what a lot of us witnessed in 3.5 years or whatever of this pandemic so far. Like, with this overarching, just terrible evil at the heart of humanity when going through a tragedy, there is so much depth to find, and she grabs it by the fucking balls, and she's amazing.
I did in regards to that. Have you seen Midnight Mass, by the way?
I have, and it's my favorite of the Flanagan series.
Bev is the closest to that character I've seen away from.
Yep.
Oh my god!
Yep.
Credit to that actress. I hated her by the end of it. Like, my girlfriend.
Absolutely.
I was watching Follow the House of Usher. My girlfriend came in and saw her, and she just left. She hates her.
Yeah, she's incredible.
I do not have The Mist on mine. I almost did. It was in my honorable mentions. It is a really good one. It's just not one I watch frequently,
right?
Because it's so depressing.
It really is.
You get to that end, and it's different from the short as well. The short is a lot more ambiguous and not as final or heartbreaking. But I think it's great. I actually think it's significantly stronger than the short. Have you seen the black and white version?
I have way back when. I've not watched the new 4K version.
It helps the effects. Like, I know a lot of people criticize the effects. It was a low budget, but I think it looks great for what it is. But the black and white's cool.
Yeah, it hides it pretty well.
All right. So what are we in? Final two?
Final two, my friend.
All right. Well, we got to get to a TV movie now, so it wouldn't be King without one. So I'm going to talk about Storm of the Century.
Whoa!
Yeah, I think that is one of King's greatest writings, and it wasn't even based on any of his books. I think it is just such an excellent series of isolation, and it has all of the King-isms without feeling overly tied to his other stuff. It takes place in the same island as Dolores Claiborne. We don't have to worry about her. Andre Lenoche feels a lot like Randall Flagg, but we're not connected to the Dark Tower. It just has all of the things that make King so special. You have the drama of these people and how far they'll push themselves to, they're talking about how they save their children, but it comes to the decision of whose child can go, essentially. And that's just good drama. Like, when it comes to King, if you can make good drama out of it, that's going to heighten up a lot of the horror elements.
So I haven't seen this one in a very, very long time, and I remember really loving it, but I didn't feel great putting it on the list tonight. So,
I mean, it was one I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. I was nervous to rewatch it when I did it last year because I was like, this is one of those I have really good memories of as a kid, but I had terrible taste. Let me put it this way. I still have terrible taste. I had worse taste as a child. So, I was like, who knows how it's going to look now, but I was pleasantly surprised because after Midnight Mass, I really wanted to watch it because Midnight Mass is basically Storm of the Century.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and find it then.
Like, there's that scene, I'm going to try not to spoil anything with Midnight Mass, but where they're all in the church, it is essentially the rock picking in Storm of the Century. You have somebody get tackled, you have somebody who's adamantly against all of this, and you have this town convincing themselves that it's okay. You were like, yeah, Flanagan likes Storm of the Century, and I'm cool with that.
Interesting. Yeah, Midnight Mass, something about that hit perfectly, and I do really think the Flanagan troupe of people that he has attached to him are just a big part of that. That cast in Midnight Mass completely eats in every single role.
Yeah, and it was fun to see him do Usher and use all those people because he got to use them in very awful ways, and that made it a lot more entertaining.
Yeah, it's very different. Okay, so this is where I see some other people lighting torches and grabbing pitchforks. My number two is The Shining, and
okay.
I have a feeling many people were going to think that my number one was The Shining, and my number one is going to make some people really pissed off, I think.
Mine too, so I'll be real excited to see it.
So The Shining is great. It's surreal. It's interesting. It is There's a bevy of things to look at in every single scene. Obviously, it's Kubrick, so everything has that perfect symmetry, has the feeling of just grotesque. Every scene, there's something about it that's just unnerving. And yeah, I know that it's not a great take on the novel. However, it is an incredible story about Jack Nicholson's character. And with Jack Torrance, like I think I saw Sibner or somebody earlier in the chat say that with The Shining, because it was Jack Nicholson, they knew what was going to happen by the end of it. But the funny thing is, when this came out, that was not the case. Jack Nicholson played so many off the wall, crazy, funny characters, just straight up dramatic roles. He was an incredible actor. He was one of the best freaking chameleons of that time. And when he starts in this role, you see him in this super happy-go-lucky mood as he's starting this movie out, and just completely lose it. And there's so much about this that I mean, the fact that we have a documentary about this movie that has countless numbers of conspiracy theories and hot takes and weird things in it shows like how deep the lore for this movie can be. I love it. It's an incredible scene of bravery for the way that we get certain people to perform in this. Obviously, we all know that Kubrick didn't have a great track record with how he treated our main actress in this film. But our three main people that we spend time with, they give every scene their all. And it's just a beautiful take on an isolating story that makes you go crazy. I love this movie. It's incredible. And every single rewatch, there's always something great to really go, oh shit, I've never noticed that angle, or this piece of production design in the background is just so intriguing. Like, how do you choose that? This is one of those best like film school movies to really see how every single thing is a choice.
And I think there is that sense of ambiguity because of that. Like, I mean, if you just lay out like the plot of the film, it's mostly straightforward. There's some questions about what happens and what doesn't. But overall, it's like you're talking about, like the background that is just so fascinating. There's things that just feel so off. Like one of my favorites that I didn't notice for years until somebody pointed out, but like when he goes to the interview office, he's in the middle of the building, but yet there is a window to the outside behind the guy. And you don't pick up on that knowingly, but something just continues to feel off scene to scene. You're like, it doesn't make sense. And you don't know what it is.
Yeah, completely unnerving. Something about every single scene, you just go, something's a little off here.
And then, of course, I know what documentary you're talking about. It's a very fascinating documentary just to see what people can come up with, because it's the same thing when you're talking about any artist. When you talk about their intentions, it's probably not as deep as you want it to be, but that doesn't make it any less cool. It doesn't make it any less legitimate. It's just people can come up with some wild ideas.
All righty, my friend. Let's see you piss some people off.
All right, number one. I'm actually going to get some stuff that just didn't quite make my top 10 that I think are worth mentioning. You've actually mentioned 4 of them, which was Stand By Me, Misery, Creepshow, and The Mist. Nice. All fantastic. The one that I'm going to be alone here, so before I piss people off, I'll just give them a real shocker of picking that. I wanted this so bad to be in my top 10 because it's such an off-the-wall pick, it seems like. But it is Larry Cohen's A Return to Salem's Lot. Can disconnect it from Salem's Lot. It is awesome. Like, it is such a wild little movie that I think I understand. I understand that when you take Salem's Lot with it, you're like, this makes no sense. The movie doesn't make sense, but it feels like a Larry Cohen film, and I can just always get behind that.
It's a good pick. Good pick.
So my number one, since we've gotten to the main people, we got to Rob Reiner, and we got to Toby Hooper, we got to Frank Darabont, who were all big into the King Sphere. So the only one we haven't really got to talk about directly is Mike Flanagan. So I'm going to end it with Dr. Sleep. I will die on the hill that Dr. Sleep is better than The Shining. I am already.
Hey, Zach.
Yeah.
Let's both talk about Dr. Sleep. It's my number one.
Wonderful. We're going to do it. Someone guessed I was going to pick The Running Man, so I at least got to prove them wrong.
Yeah, this is going to piss a lot of people off because we didn't mention, and like Pet Cemetery has not even got a mention tonight. There's a couple big ones that have not even graced our lips tonight, but something about Flanagan works so perfectly for me.
He understands Kingstown. Like I think that's something, and I don't think anyone has to do it. I don't think Hooper is one that's interested in Kingstown or anything like that. But I think Flanagan gets it very well. Like he understands the heart of what makes King King to me, the melodrama, the things like that. And I think there's no better example of that than Doctor Sleep, which should have been the most impossible movie to make.
Yeah, I was really ready for the flashback scenes to be god awful, and somehow they were just respectful and like properly carried out. I really expected to be able to tear apart every single scene that they did that in, and I couldn't. I got to admit, Ewan McGregor way better than I expected him to be in this film. I was completely stuck for every single scene that they did for this. I was very happy with this like trying to toe the line as they went down this entire crazy story, because this could have fallen apart at many different parts, and somehow Flanagan is able to wrangle it all in, and he doesn't always do that. Like House of Usher, I gotta admit, didn't really hold for me like this did. I think House of Usher is maybe his biggest failure for me yet, as far as everything he's made, literally. I'm very happy with this one. I really wish more people had seen it. I feel like a lot of people just refuse to watch it because of the connection to The Shining, and I don't know why. This movie is so damn good.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually thought you were going to pick Gerald's Game because Gerald's Game is one that people said was impossible to make because
That's what I was alluding to earlier.
yeah, and I was like, okay, Gerald's Game is a great one. I love Gerald's Game, but to me, Doctor Sleep was even harder because he made it harder on himself. He could have sat there and said, "We're going to do an adaptation of Doctor Sleep. We are not going to connect it to Kubrick. We are just going to do a King one and just accept it because making it, we'd have to change so much about the novel in the final act to make it work." And he said, "You know what? I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to make it connect. I'm going to get, not only am I going to connect it to Kubrick's film and make a sequel to something that everyone's going to automatically be distrustful of, I'm going to make sure I don't make it until King approves of it."
Yep.
A sequel to a movie he hates. Like, he set himself up to fail every step of the way, and I feel like he succeeded every time, especially the director's cut. Like, I think the mistake was not putting that director's cut out because it's such a stronger film.
Yeah, and that is perhaps maybe the reason why I love it so much. I've actually not seen the theatrical cut. I've only watched the director's cut.
And I won't even say the theatrical cut is bad. I really enjoyed it, but it felt very rushed. It didn't pay off like the final act, which I know is still controversial with people, where the last act takes place at the Overlook. I really love the scenes at the Overlook, and it is the nostalgia. I love every moment of being back in the Overlook. And I like the connection to the ending of The Shining as a novel. Like, that's honestly, you look at it, you're like, that's where King screwed up when he wanted to make Doctor Sleep. He destroyed the Overlook. And he couldn't do anything with it in Doctor Sleep. It was cool for him to be able to kind of bring those worlds together. And I mean, even get Kubrick's state to sign off and said they're happy with it. I was like, that's probably the greatest accomplishment he'll ever have, in my opinion.
Yeah, literally accomplishment, I think, is the right word there. And there's a lot of these things that, you could argue is like a masterpiece of dialogue, like Midnight Mass, or a technical masterpiece on some of these other scenes. But specifically, this one is an accomplishment for being able to literally overcome literally every adversity that could possibly have been against him, and he pulls it off beautifully with an incredible cast. Not sure why I didn't bring up Rebecca Ferguson when I started speaking, but she is, when I alluded to maybe the best villain earlier to Annie Wilkes, Rebecca Ferguson might take it for me. She is freaking terrifying in this. Not sure why some people are turned off by some of those scenes, but her scenes specifically in this are legendary. She is absolutely taking this role to a next level.
And to me, we were talking, and this is kind of the movie I was alluding to, that is basically how King writes vampires now. Like, this is his vampires for his shine, for that. Because that's essentially what they are. They're based off Eastern European stuff. They are seductress in a sense. They take life force from somebody to live longer. And it's such an interesting way to go about it that connects so well to his world, but not without. Sometimes King can get a little over, in my opinion, get a little over trying to connect everything. But I think this is a much more natural that we're going to just talk about Shine and how important Shine is to the King universe. Yeah. And actually kind of taking a more fantastical element, but still keeping it as a sequel to something pretty grounded.
Honorable mentions for me, since I did not get to bring them up the first time, because I did not think we were going to have the same number one. I really thought you were going to go way out of left field. Number 11 for me was Gerald's Game. This was very close to making it on my list. I think the only reason it didn't is because I've only seen it twice. And some of these others I've seen like 40 times, and I love them so much. But Gerald's Game is a damn good take on that story. I can't even remember who it was, but just this week, it might have been my mom I was talking to, and she's in the chat right now, but I was telling somebody they need to go watch this movie because it is so well done. I think it was my mom, because we were talking about the wolf scene and how just terrifying that is and isolating. It feels kind of like The Shining in a lot of that. My number 12 was 1408. Love 1408. I think it's a great movie.
1408 is great.
I think that it's way better than it had any right to be. My number 13 was 1922, another Netflix take on one of these stories. I think Thomas Jane was pretty damn good in this movie. Unfortunately, I think that second act was just leaving a lot to be desired for me. But other than that, I think it was really, really well done. I had the main
so hard. It's such. I think that should have been like a 45-minute short film, and I think it would have been perfect.
And Netflix would have been perfect for that. If you're going to do that, make it for Netflix. Mentioned The Mangler earlier. One that we haven't talked about yet tonight. I kind of love Graveyard Shift. I
haven't seen it. I was one on my list I wanted to get to, but I've never seen it.
It doesn't quite hit the quality for me as some of these others, but it absolutely deserves a mention tonight. And then I had Shawshank written down. I know it's not on your list, but for me, it is slightly better than The Green Mile. I think it's a wonderful movie, wonderful story. Although, just like I think it was Joel said in the chat earlier tonight, at this point in time, it is easily one of the most overrated films of all time. This is not like God's gift to filmmaking when you watch Shawshank Redemption, like a lot of people think that it is. It's a very good story, and it's very well made, incredibly acted. It's just not the best movie of all time.
It's a very likable movie. Like, I think that, like, even me, who's kind of being a little negative on it, I still like the movie. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's hard to criticize it because Frank Darabont is very good at what he does. It's just like, do I ever feel like rewatching it at a time? No. Does not come up.
The hard thing is, for like 10 years of my life, every time that it was on TV, and it played on TNT a lot, I would sit and finish it no matter where it was in the story. And I've seen Shawshank probably more than any of these on this list, which is wild because it's not even like my go-to type of movie. It's just something about it. It just ropes you in, and it's because it's so well made. Darabont, and I think that's probably the big thing to take away from this tonight. Darabont and Flanagan, I think, are the two that can adapt King stories best. Flanagan does it for the horror. Darabont does it for the dramas, and they are both just so damn great.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, when you look at, like, we talked about a lot of great directors who tackled these, and they all did their own thing. They all put their own spin on it. But I think not many of them had interest in adapting King. They liked the story, they liked the idea, and said, I'm going to do it my own way. And I think that's respectful. I think that's great. I don't think there's a thing wrong with that, because people like Carpenter and Hooper aren't going to be as interested in that. Where somebody like Flanagan, who obviously has a lot of love for his influences, wants to pay respect in the only way he knows how.
Absolutely. So, King adaptations, anything else that you want to bring up?
Ooh, I'm sitting here trying to think. I do like the It miniseries. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I actually do think it's a pretty solid film. My memories of it are pretty good. That's another one I just haven't done. I'm trying to look on here.
The nostalgia of that one, though, I really feel like if it wasn't Tim Curry, it would not be favored nearly as highly as it is.
And that's probably true, because that's a lot of where my memories are for it. Rose Red is another one I seem to remember liking, but it's also been a long time, and it's longer than Storm of the Century is, so I just haven't gotten around to it. I have a DVD copy here somewhere, so I need to get to it.
Nice. Dude McMahon is calling out Tom Holland for the Langoliers and Thinner. I gotta admit, I've got a soft spot for Thinner. I worked on the Scream Factory disc that's about to be released,
Oh, that's awesome.
editing the interviews for that disc brought back so many wild memories of what was happening around that time with this, because the timeline of things were sort of weird. Holland was brought in at an odd time. The person that was going to do the effects changed a couple times, and Thinner is not a great movie, but the effects in that movie, again, like I talked about with Christine, the effects on Thinner are freaking legendary. Absolutely love it. David Holland, did anyone mention Running Man? No, neither one of us mentioned Running Man. I have nothing against it. I don't even like classify it with King. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, I mean, King didn't write that book.
Yeah.
See, yeah, there we go. Richard Bachman.
Technically, Thinner was Bachman too. As I'm talking about that, that's perfect timing. Yeah, Thinner is not great, but the effects in that movie are a damn lot of fun.
So I do have to tell my story with the Langoliers, because that's another very influential movie in my childhood. So I used to have to get up really early for school. I had to get up at like 5:30 when my dad was leaving, so I'd get my sister up and we'd get on the bus by 7 a.m. And so there was this thing where I was going through, we would DVR, or actually I think we were recording them on VHS. We would record the miniseries that were coming out, like The Stand and things like that. And The Langoliers was one of them. And I was very excited after The Stand to get to The Langoliers.
Yeah.
And The Langoliers is important to me because it's the first time I can remember being truly disappointed. Because I would get up for a whole week, watch like 45 minutes of it, and then wait till the next day. And then I got to watch the next 45 minutes. And then I saw The Langoliers and I was like, oh, I don't know what to feel anymore. And I think that was when I first felt disappointment in a story, in a movie or anything. And it's not fair to the movie. The movie is, it was doing what the budget has. But you know what? Like, 8-year-old me does not understand that. It understands that's what I waited a whole week to see.
Well, and honestly, in the world where everybody complains about remakes, I kind of think something like Langoliers is the perfect thing to remake, because it's a really interesting story, really compelling. The way that it's written is great. The world just wasn't ready to make it yet. And if we could make it in 2023, we could probably do something great with it.
And I mean, that's a lot of King stuff. Like, I mean, you either needed to scale a lot back to make it work. Because, I mean, we talk about it. We're not going to be talking about Turtle Gods, because that's going to make a mess of things.
Or child gang rape.
Yeah. It was a coke-filled time. Sums up Kings early anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that. And I mean, that's why I'm kind of excited for Amazon I think it's Amazon's paying all the money for Dark Tower. I was like, good, because it needs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it needs somebody who knows what they're doing to make it.
As I brought up, there was no mention of Pet Sematary tonight. How do you feel about Pet Sematary?
So Pet Sematary to me is a top 5 Stephen King book, and no one has figured out how to make it. The first movie is fine. Like, I've already pissed people off enough, so I might as well just be completely honest here. That movie's fine. It's okay.
I think the first Pet Sematary has Zelda and about nothing else going for it. Yeah.
I mean, it has Herman Munster in it, and he's great. I like
Fred Gwynn is incredible, but he I don't know. It's kind of obviously it's an odd role to take up, especially when you're like you're the only one delivering the lore for the film, but you're not like this scary character, even though they kind of tried to make John Lithgow be this scary one in the remake. But I don't know. Other than Zelda, that first movie's pretty damn boring to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with a lot when you talk about people who try to adapt King, is they get parts of it. They get the iconic parts of it for me. But then they can't. I feel like they can't connect it together. Like when I read Pet Sematary, it is so tragic to read. Like, you are really understanding. You're watching a character do the thing is the stupidest thing they can do, It's the worst decision they can make. But every step of the way, you say, I understand it. I agree with it because I understand what he's going through.
I'm officially losing many of my closest friends are leaving right now.
I knew this would be a fun one because I think everyone's very passionate about King because I mean, unless we're born in like the 50s or 60s, every one of us has had this in our childhoods at some point.
Yeah.
There's something nostalgic about King.
Yeah, and specifically about Pet Sematary. I think for a lot of people around that age, it was like the huge period for King. You were the perfect age to watch Pet Sematary, and therefore it just hit exactly right. Unfortunately, I came just slightly after that, and that means it was built up, and I just didn't click with it when it came out.
Yeah, I came a lot during the TV movie era for King, so I associate a lot of King with TV movies. And I think that's probably a big part of why Storm of the Century is so high and it's very questionable for a lot of people. But that is probably one of the first things from King I remember watching besides The Shining.
Interesting. I think Carrie was my first, now that I think about it.
It was probably up there. I know my mom had that on VHS. But before my computer dies and you're here by yourself, I'm going to grab my charger real quick.
I apologize to everybody that is already just livid. I'm not a super fan of Pet Sematary. I didn't hate the remake because it was so different from the original. I thought they're both about the same level of fine. Does Lawnmower Man need a 4K? Probably not, but Shout will probably give it to us. Sleepwalkers is definitely not a masterpiece.
I thought about Garrus once I get back.
Right as I say Sleepwalkers is not a masterpiece, Zombies Ate My Arm says it is a masterpiece.
So, okay, there we go. So I love Mick Garris as a person. I think he is awesome. I love what he's done for horror. I can't think of a movie he's done that I think is great. I think he does interesting things. But I love him more as a producer and like, I guess a showrunner when we talk about like masters of horror than I do necessarily as a director. I think his interviews are great. I love him as an interviewer too. He did an interview with Flanagan, and that was, I mean, he still can do it well. He should do even more than he does.
I'm looking up his full filmography, and there's nothing that's sticking out as incredible. Psycho 4 is not bad, but it's still not anywhere near the first three.
Yeah, Psycho is a weirdly consistent series, and it has no reason to be.
Right. Ronnie says, I want my $80 Lawnmower Man lobby cards. No thanks. Ask Zach, he might disagree.
What am I disagreeing about?
Maybe Lawnmower Man and Sleepwalkers.
I have okay memories with Sleepwalkers, though. It's been a long time. Like, there are a lot of these. I said a whole month I was going to sit there and try to rewatch a bunch of them. And then I went through Cujo and It Chapter 1. And I think the disappointment, I was like, sometimes it's okay for things to be left as memories. That's okay.
Yeah. This comment, my Dude McMahon says, my wife and I drove by the houses that were used in Pet Sematary. No joke, we drove through a rock quarry to get there and had tons of semi-trucks rolling down the narrow road, just like the movie. And yeah, I think King took a lot of that from real, like, man, this is kind of dangerous around here.
Somebody mentioned Dead Zone. Yeah, Dead Zone's good. It's like a really good movie. It just didn't quite make my top 15.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It's not even, oh man, it's not like top 5 or 7 Cronenberg for me, probably. I mean,
and it's a weird one for Cronenberg because you listen to a lot of interviews with him where he really doesn't like supernatural stuff. So him going with King is such an odd idea, but he does good with it. But like, I remember watching it for the first time after I knew that, and I was like, he must like write around some of this somehow. But he doesn't. It's straight up a supernatural story. And it's like, okay, different for Cronenberg, but I dig it.
Yeah. And I think, God, with Cronenberg, there's probably 10 of his I'd rather watch before Dead Zone. I think it's good.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Cronenberg is great at what he does. That's the hard part.
Yeah. I mean, it's another one of those where I would gladly rewatch Dead Zone. Just, it wouldn't be first choice. Walken's great in it. He's awesome in it.
He's always fun. Ben is saying, just tuned in. Did anyone include Silver Bullet?
Me.
Thankfully, Zach did.
Yeah, I did. Oh my God.
What about Firestarter? No love for Native American George C. Scott.
Well, at least it's maybe the 84 one and not whatever they put out a year or two ago. God,
well, I'm just glad we made this be the second take, because the first time when you brought up Cat's Eye at number 3, that was pretty abysmal. Oh man, there's a good question. Any directors you think would make good King adaptations?
The first part, I'm gonna go with the first answer that came into my mind, but Juan, just because he's got that goofiness about him that I think he would bring. And the effects, the focus on effects and like some fast paced stuff. I actually think Juan would make a very interesting King one. It wouldn't be accurate to King, but I think it would be interesting.
I want to see like a super pretentious Robert Eggers King.
Oh my God. I'm trying to think what would be the best one for him. I'm trying to sit here and think. He would do a good revival one, but I can't see him doing anything modern day.
Oh man, you know what? I mean, he's doing Nosferatu. I would love to see him, adapt that slightly to Salem's Lot.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, he would probably do well with that. But Eggers would be good. I don't think Astor would actually be very strong at King. No. I don't know why. Just he doesn't seem like it would fit him.
No, it's not quite depressing enough for Ari Aster. Stan has a good one. He says Richard Stanley, and I agree. That probably.
Unfortunately, I don't think that'll ever happen now.
It won't happen, but yeah, he'd probably.
Yeah, he has the ideas for it, right tone.
Do we think The Talisman will ever be made into a film?
Is it not?
I don't think so.
I haven't seen it if it is, but for some reason I thought they had made one. But that's the one with Schaub, right? Black House.
I think so.
Yeah. Since Eggers could do Eye of the Dragon, that's the only one I could think of that would be really interesting.
There is a movie called The Talisman, but it's based on another novel.
Okay, that might be what I'm thinking of.
Sibner says, let Eggers do The Man in Black as a short film.
Yeah. They do desert shots. And then somebody said Long Walk. I would love to see Long Walk.
Yeah. Someone do The Long Walk already, yeah. Eggers directing The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Eyes of the Dragon, says Stan. Yeah, there's a lot that could be done really well. And honestly, again, we were talking about remakes for a second. A lot of the Stephen King stuff that is not highly regarded, the stories weren't the bad part there. It was just, there was some poor acting, and obviously effects in a lot of the Stephen King stuff was just bottom tier. And if they could throw some money at some of these, they could do some really good stuff nowadays.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't mention it on here, and actually I just thought about it, but the miniseries that Hulu did, 11/22/63, was surprisingly very good. I mean, they could do more stuff like that just because some of his stuff is so lore heavy. Not everything needs to be a miniseries, but there are certain things that's lore heavy enough to do it.
Yeah, and obviously 11/22/63 is the perfect way to do a miniseries because it's wrapped up in so many different things. But I don't know, there was something about that was just compelling. And it wasn't even like Franco, even though obviously Franco's on a weird not canceled spot. But yeah, good story in that one. This has been fun. I think a lot of people
make your whole chat mad at me.
Me too. Let's see how many people come back next week.
Good way to start the new year.
Yeah, what a way to celebrate the end of the year. All right, Zach, I think we've done it. We did pretty great with this. Reminder to everybody that next week is subscriber week for Vinegar Syndrome. Kicking off on January 1st, I'm here live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on the 1st. We're going to be talking about everything that gets announced. And then next Thursday, Dr. Will Dodson is back, and we will be having some fun discussions because we will not have a ton of announcements next week. So we'll be talking about movie stuff a long time after that. Zach, thanks for doing this, sir.
Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to come on and give some bad takes.
Well, this one was extra special. I appreciate all you guys. Hopefully, you're interested in coming back next Thursday. If not, leave a comment. Either way, I'm glad you're here, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share it with someone else that may appreciate this.